So we have some breaking news. Perhaps you've already heard about this, but we'll tell you anyway. The New York Mets, in the last month and a half, if you will, have been at the center of baseball news, just in terms of new ownership, the newly engaged rumors of acquisitions, and tonight they made a big one. Apparently, the New York Mets are in talks to trade starting pitcher, sometimes utility pitcher, but started out as a starting pitcher, Steven Matz, to the Toronto Blue Jays for 3 prospects who seem to be unnamed at this time. This is completely breaking news. So, Mike, I'm going to turn to you right now. Immediate thoughts. What's coming into your head right now?
Okay, so as I'm looking at my phone right now, I'm also seeing that Houston is actually finalizing who their head coach is going to be, David Culley, Ravens assistant. But we can talk about that another time. But that helps to more Deshaun Watson. He definitely is going to leave, but that's not the point. So I'm seeing as far as Matt's. To me, it seems that the deal it's finalizing according to Jeff Passan. So here are my initial thoughts. So obviously, in addition to being a diehard Jeff fan, everyone knows I'm a diehard Met fan. Steven Matz, look, was not that good for us. I'll be honest. I was never a fan of Steven Matz. I felt like he'd have one good game in a while, and then he'd go out and get shelled. I mean, this guy, who can forget when he gave up, oh my God, what was it? Maybe like 12 runs in the first inning one time and had to leave the game. I mean, that was just not good. So, Steven, look, if there's anything we can say about you, in your debut, you had 4 RBIs. That was nice. You know, your grandfather made that crazy GIF when he was up in the seats going like crazy. He made a good GIF for Mets Twitter. That was a nice one. So we appreciate that. You know, you're part of the 2015 team. Okay. But yeah, this is a good move for the Mets. 3 prospects. I mean, I don't know where they are in the Blue Jays farm system, but look, the Mets have a depleted farm system themselves. That could help us obviously get some more salary off the books to help us maybe get, we could talk about this in a few minutes, whether or not I even want Bauer, but to get a Bauer or sign some guys like Jackie Bradley Jr. or something. So overall, initial thoughts, I think it's a good move for the Mets.
Yeah, I'm reading into it, and it says that it clears $5.2 million from their payroll. So I think that definitely adds fuel to the fire there, that maybe they're clearing room so that they can get Trevor Bauer. So I think immediately, good move, right? Especially if they're clearing some payroll and then they're going to do something even better with this payroll. I think that this is exciting. I think that I agree with Mike. I think this is a good move.
Okay. I got lots that I want to say here. I'll start off first with, I guess this will be my official farewell to Steven Matz as a New York Met. Something that Mike alluded to. I believe his struggles were well documented as a starting pitcher for the Mets, but I actually think his successes were fewer and farther between than even those people would give him credit for. The first impressions are huge in every sense of the word, and when you're a starting pitcher, it means just as much. Steven Matz had a great first start coming up from AAA for the New York Mets, had 4 RBIs in that game like Mike talked about. That, I can just tell you from watching him myself, it puts you in a certain mindset when he pitches. And all those times he would continue to struggle, and you would still think, well, we know what he can do. We know what he can do, and this is a struggle for him. But then the successes stopped. And unfortunately, and I hate to say this about Steven Matz because he seems like a very nice guy, and I always liked him. But it does seem like eventually he just became extra weight on the team, specifically salary-wise. So I wish Steven Matz the most success in Toronto. But there's a couple of things to mention here. First off, like we've talked about, this is likely clearing up salary cap space for Trevor Bauer. Now, whether or not he's a right fit for the Mets in terms of what they need, but mostly in terms of the current Mets culture, that comes into question. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But also, another interesting thing here is that's not the only talk about the Mets we've heard in the last couple of weeks. There's been talk about Cubs third baseman Chris Bryant being traded to the Mets. And, of course, that's another big salary the Mets would have to take on. And, of course, the Mets and the Blue Jays were the top 2 candidates for Chris Bryant if he were to be traded from Chicago. So it brings up an interesting question of there's a couple things the Mets could do, apparently. And again, this is just what we know outside of the organization. So, Kale, let me start with you, actually. If you're the Mets, what are you doing? Are you going for Bauer, or are you going to try and trade for Chris Bryant? What are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that they're in a tough position. I think that both acquisitions would be great for their culture. I think that they are both big names. And so I think that both would bring a level of excitement back to the Mets fans. But I think you might as well go for Trevor Bauer. I'm not sure necessarily that they need him, but I think that if you can, you might as well. Like, he's a great pitcher, Cy Young winner. So if they're clearing the space and they have the money, why wouldn't you take someone so great when you have this opportunity to? Why would you miss it and then wait for later? Like, I just think that now seems to be the right time. It feels like all of the pieces are falling into place where Bauer would want to come to New York. I know he said he wanted to be a part of a winning culture, which the Mets don't quite have yet, but I think that anyone can tell that they are looking to and that they're fiery and passionate and going for it. So I think it's a good organization right now to want to join. And I think that they should be going for him because they have the money to, and they're one of the only teams that does.
Yeah, I would say so. First, personally, as a Met fan myself, I would have rather the Mets taking this money because, I mean, look, Bauer's going to be more expensive than what they would have paid. But what I'm going to say is I would have rather them spend the money on George Springer than to bring in Bauer. And the main reason I say that is I question some of Bauer's off the field antics, even on the field. I mean, who can forget when he was playing against the Royals? He pulled him out of the game. He chucked the ball over the center field batter's eye. I mean, the guy is, I mean, to put it nicely, is a psychopath. So, I mean, I'm just going to put that out there. So that's one thing. That being said, I do. And the other thing to think about Bauer is this: had a good year last year, but just remember, it was a shortened season. He was 5-4. 1.73 ERA is very nice, but remember, they were playing those condensed schedules where they were only playing regional teams. So who was he playing a lot? The Tigers, the Royals, the Pirates, through the worst teams in baseball. That's going to inflate your numbers a little bit. Now, I think the Mets desperately need more starting pitching because if the Mets have shown anything, if not only last year and pretty much every year since 2015 when they were building up the young stud roster of pitchers, is they need depth. So many times, whether it was Harvey, whether it was Matz, Syndergaard, even DeGrom, injuries killed this rotation. The Mets need a solid number 2 behind Jake. I would like for that to be Syndergaard, but he's coming off of an injury. He's coming off a major surgery, and he's not going to be ready probably. I know he's making progress, but he's probably not going to be ready with this Tommy John surgery until maybe midpoint of the season, a little bit earlier, maybe May or something. But it's going to be tough. You got Stroman there. I like Marcus Stroman, but he didn't play last year because he opted out because of COVID. And when he did come to the Mets, he was a little up and down. You got Cookie Carrasco in that Lindor trade. I like Cookie. He's a little bit older though. You also got David Peterson, who was a rookie last year, who I like very much. He's going to be the lefty now that Matz is gone. So I think the Mets desperately need a true number 2 behind Jake. I just question if Bauer's temperament, and look, I hope he proves me wrong. Hopefully he comes in here, he's a saint, doesn't cause any issues. But the track record said he's a little bit of a cyber bully going after people. I've heard that he's had some run-ins with female reporters, which is just abhorrent. We do not want that kind of culture here in New York, especially after the whole Jared Porter situation. That is not a look the Mets need. And so, or anyone needs for that matter. So I don't know. I'm very up in the air about Bauer. They need a pitcher, but is he worth the headache? I don't know.
Folks, we will get to our regularly scheduled content for this segment in just a second. But yes, as you were saying, Mike, to put a punctuation, if you will, on this whole situation in terms of Trevor Bauer, I have been a skeptic about the Mets acquiring Bauer, as many people have been, specifically in light of recent events in the New York Mets organization, like Michael was saying. It does make you question, because the Mets seem to be a team more than anybody that wants to have that change of culture, a little more open of a culture. And Steve Cohen does seem to be a guy that wants that. The Mets found themselves in a bad situation last week when, the Jared Porter news came out that nobody knew about. And they moved rather swiftly on that matter. But so personally, I think if you're the Mets, that is good enough reasoning to skip out on Trevor Bauer. It's a lot of money for a guy that, while he may be good, and then you would have the last 3 NL Cy Young awards all on your team. It does make you question whether this is the right move for a culture that wants to move forward, especially if you're the New York Mets. So,